I face the final curtain, my friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain. I've lived a life that's full, I've traveled each and every highway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Regrets, I've had a few, and then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do and saw it through without exemption. I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way. Well, that was My Way by Frank Sinatra, which is an all-time favorite of mine. And it also happens to be the favorite of my next guest, Guillermo Corea, who is the Managing Director for Workplace Innovation Lab and Venture Capital at SHRM. And Guillermo is based in the US. So today, Guillermo and I are going to be talking about how HR is actually really the thought leader for workplace innovation. So join us in this conversation. I have with me today Guillermo Corea, who is the Managing Director for the Workplace Innovation Lab and Venture Capital at SHRM, based in the US. So Guillermo and I are going to be talking about HR being a thought leader on workplace innovation. So Guillermo, welcome to my show.
Hey Thomas, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be with you here, speaking about such a great topic about why HR really should be the leading or the leader in workplace innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Guillermo, if I look at my my corporate career, and I moved out of a formal corporate role about 7 years ago, and those days HR used to be largely an operational role, right? I think I would really draw a parallel and say that HR really was focusing more on being a system of record, right? I mean, I think the focus was more on doing performance appraisals, organizing events, doing the annual survey, engagement survey, and so on. However, a lot of things have happened in the last couple of years, thanks to the pandemic. And suddenly HR has been pushed into the forefront, and they've had to really take the lead in a number of initiatives, which has really moved HR to a slightly more strategic role. And I think it has also helped define or redefine the profile of the HR professional. So Guillermo, having said that, why and how do you see HR as actually being a thought leader on workplace innovation?
Yeah, and I love the way that you started this conversation, right? And giving people kind of like a background of where, frankly, where HR used to be, right? It's funny because I remember having a conversation with somebody at one of the SHRM conferences, and they said, that was your grandma's HR, right? HR has changed dramatically, especially because of what's happened over the past couple of years. And if you really think about it, right, there is no one that is better positioned in an organization to drive workplace innovation. Not finance, not marketing, not operation, and certainly not IT. And my apologies to folks out there in IT, but that's the truth, right? If you really think about it, HR plays a critical role. They are the ones that are responsible for managing and developing an organization's most valuable assets, which is its people, right? So HR HR professionals are the people that are well positioned to identify and implement innovative solutions that can improve the employee experience and drive business results. The other thing to think about really quickly is that they are also the ones that are well versed in the latest trends and best practices in HR, right? Or as we like to say at my team, a lot of the critical workplace challenges that are happening out there. And you can think about employee engagement and recruitment, technology to automate and improve HR processes, diversity, equity, and inclusion, the rise of the gig economy. I mean, we could go on and on and on and talk about about a lot of these things. So
no, I think I sort of agree with what you say, and clearly I think it's also, I think a lot of research has actually shown that organizations with great HR functions are able to outperform, out hire, and out innovate many of their peers. And having a great HR function is also a very significant competitive advantage, to organizations. But having said that, there are now lots of challenges around these days. For instance, if you look at the hybrid workplace, defining the hybrid workplace, and so many changes have happened. How do you really look at managers and their ability to manage this new hybrid environment, right? And then there's this very hot topic, in markets like India today, about employees moonlighting, doing side gigs, and so on and so forth. So I think there are lots of challenges, and I think employees and managers are also center stage, because a lot of these things are also happening because organizations are saying, and I recollect a well-known HR guru saying that the new mantra is employees first and customers second, right? So given that as the background, I also see employees and managers in a way co-creating innovation with HR, because it perhaps is not so much a siloed function as it perhaps used to be earlier. Right? So any thoughts around that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, the collaboration, right, between HR and other functions in an organization, right, is extremely critical, right? So one way of thinking about this is how the HR profession is really transforming, right, within an organization, right? HR skills are becoming increasingly more important for line and functional managers, especially soft skills, right? We hear about that all the time, about how managers really need to have those soft skills like empathy, for example, or to make sure that they have a high level of EQ, not just IQ, right? One thing that I think about is a survey that SHRM did 3 years ago, right? That showed that 58% of workers quit because of a bad manager. So it's critical for managers to possess some of the skills that HR professionals have. And if you think about it, how this affects the HR profession, right, is that it becomes important for HR because having better managers in an organization means that HR is allowed to focus on more strategic initiatives. As a matter of fact, this is one of the reasons why SHRM created the people manager qualification. So
right. No, absolutely. So I think a related area here is the capability building of HR within an organization, and perhaps that could be one of the biggest obstacles to growth, because what's really happened is that during the pandemic, people were forced to take a lot of decisions, forced to take a lot of initiatives, but did they have the relevant skills? And how do you really manage younger HR professionals, and how do you really ensure that their capability can be built? So really, so what should organizations, in your view, be doing to ensure that the capability building at the HR function is getting the necessary momentum?
Yeah, well, number one, at the very, very top of the list, right, is that it needs to be made a strategic priority. And the appropriate funding and resources need to be allocated. You really can't move the needle unless you have strong support from the very, very top, and in making this a strategic priority, because once again, HR is responsible for managing and developing the most valuable asset that an organization has, right? It's people. And if you don't have the right resources to support HR, how can HR, then support everyone else in the organization, right? One analogy that I have for you is, when you're in an airplane, right, and they're giving you instructions and everything, and they talk about the mask, if there's a cabin air pressure issue and the mask drops, right, what do they tell you? They tell you to put on your mask first and then help everyone else out afterwards,
Absolutely.
right? So how is HR going to be able to help others in the organization if they don't have the right resources to be able to do it, and certainly when you think about the younger generation, right, it's a generation that's coming up that's very tech savvy, that has been around, all the different technologies that you and I, saw grow over the past, years and everything. But to them, that's natural, right? And they're expecting to be able to take advantage of these resources when they get into an organization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, moving on, I think you did touch upon this, but I think HR skills are now all pervasive. It's not really restricted to the HR organization. So to my mind, all the line managers and functional managers, need to imbibe these skills. And perhaps a lot of the traditional work that was being done by HR will probably migrate more to, the line and functional, roles. And I know I know you spoke about HR being more strategic, but what is therefore likely to happen in terms of in terms of the way HR hires people within the HR function, and how do you really see the role of HR shifting, keeping this as the background as well?
Yeah, actually, that this touches in what you were saying at the beginning, right, of how HR used to be viewed as and you use the term operational. I actually think that HR used to be viewed more as an admin function, right? So now what's happening is that because of everything that's happened over the past 2 years, HR is rather than being primarily focused on administrative and transactional tasks, which is something that has been happening, we know about that, right, over the past 2 years or so, right? But the focus now is that HR professionals are increasingly being viewed as strategic partners and consultants that can provide valuable insights and support to managers and employees to help them develop and grow. HR professionals are really being called to be more strategic,
So I think I just want to lead on from what you mentioned, which is the HR function being strategic, and I think that's really critical. But having said that, when I talk to CEOs of companies, one of the things they really talk about is the importance of job rotation, right? It's really critical, therefore, for HR professionals to move into non-HR roles during their career so that they're able to get a better sense for business. And then perhaps when they move back to HR, they can be far more strategic because they have a deep sense for business. Likewise, to also have, non-HR professionals, move into the HR function. So, that kind of job rotation is something that people talk about. But what's your take on it? Is it really happening in organizations?
Yeah, it's something that I think we're slowly beginning to see, and as you were saying, job rotation can be a valuable tool for anyone in any organization, right, to be able to develop the skills and knowledge, and especially when we look at it from an HR perspective, right, and in us wanting to elevate the HR profession, right, if we have people in other functions that clearly understand what HR professionals go through, then it helps them to be better managers, because they're able to deal with a lot of the issues of employee management, right? One thing that I think is very important for HR professionals going forward is that they definitely need to become more tech savvy, right? Just because of all the changes that are happening, right? I think it's essential now for an HR professional to be well versed. Notice how I said well versed, not a subject matter expert, but well versed on topics such as artificial intelligence, right? Virtual reality, the HR blockchain, voice. You know, these are all disruptive technologies that you know, can address a lot of the critical workplace challenges that they're having. So you know, that's one area where I feel that perhaps, hey, you know, Miss HR, do you want to take a rotation with the IT department and really understand what it takes to, for example, onboard a new employee from a technical perspective, right? Of putting them into the system and, you know, having everything go according to plan, you know.
And so since you spoke about technology, let me just, you know, pivot into that topic. And one of the things really is that there's been a lot of technology adoption at enterprises, you know, largely when it comes to ERP systems, CRM systems, marketing automation, project management, and what have you. While there is plenty of HR tech out there, and we've got some great companies and several unicorns which have been HR tech, somehow the adoption of HR tech has still not really kept pace with other processes, which probably means that there's huge potential. But what do you think needs to change? And I know you did mention that HR professionals need to become savvy, but it's not just the HR professional, it's the entire thought process within the organization. So how do you feel organizations should really start looking at HR technology, and how should HR professionals themselves start looking at technology?
Yeah, so one key factor there that I feel has slowed the adoption of technology in HR is a lack of awareness and understanding among HR professionals, right? And hence what I was saying earlier about how HR professionals really need to become more tech savvy. And the reason why that's important is because, you know, without having that knowledge, they're really not going to be able to see the potential benefits of all these HR technologies that you and I are well aware of, you know. So in order to be able to drive that adoption in an organization, HR professionals really need to understand, you know, what it is. Don't just depend on IT to tell you, like, hey, we need to implement this HRIS system, right? No, it really should be HR saying, like, hey, you know what? I've looked at all these platforms, and guess what? This is the one that I feel is important for our organization, right? Every HR professional really needs to look at their organization, and you know, because every organization is different, right? One thing that I'd like to point out really quickly, if you don't mind, is that that's one of the reasons why SHRM developed the workplace tech community. We created a workplace tech community that we're viewing as the online playground between HR and the workplace tech innovators out there. You know, we think this is going to be an area where people are going to be, HR professionals are going to be able to explore a lot of these technologies and determine how they can be used to solve critical workplace challenges and address the issue that you were mentioning.
Right. Yeah, but having said that, you know, I also have seen over the last 3 years, I think some level of acceleration. I mean, it maybe not to that extent, and probably that's also happening because the new generation of HR professionals are digital first, right? So they understand technology, so they are on par with, you know, most of the other employees as far as tech is concerned. Plus, there are lots of HR tech events happening now, you know, so, and there are plenty of professionals attending them. There's also, I think, you know, a lot of people have got hands-on experience in implementing HR tech, because I guess on an average, enterprises might be having 10 plus HR tech systems getting implemented. So someone who's worked in a larger enterprise, has had hands-on exposure, probably he or she would be, you know, ahead of the curve when they maybe move to another organization which needs to adopt, you know, technology. And obviously, the pandemic has, you know, pressed the accelerator, you know, to a fair extent, right, as far as adoption goes. And I guess the timing is also right for HR perhaps to have an HR tech manager. And I think some organizations have already started hiring for positions of that kind. Yeah, but hopefully, I think, you know, we're going to see far more adoption and far more acceleration, which is really going to help the HR tech startup ecosystem to grow at a much faster rate as well, and probably see a lot more innovation there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and finally, I just wanted to look at, we've spoken about the HR professional, the HR organization, but what is really the role of how are you really now looking at the leader, which is the CHRO, and the role of the CHRO now actually changing, given all these changes that we expect happening within the HR organization?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, we viewed the CHR role as one that should be reporting directly to the CEO of a company, right? Period. We that's how we feel about the strategic importance of HR. CHROs should be reporting to the CEO. But there's a lot of a lot of the changes are being driven by macro changes in our society. So when you look at employee activism, right? CHROs now are worrying about things like, if you look at Amazon and Starbucks, they're trying to unionize, right? So the democratization of the workplace, right? There's an increasing reporting and understanding of human capital as a business measurement that they are having to to take a look at, the psychological safety in the workplace, right? That is a huge one for CHROs, especially here in the United States, when you consider a lot of the issues that you see in the U.S. that you don't see anywhere else. Unfortunately, like the mass shooting that just happened in Chesapeake, Virginia, at a Walmart store, right? Other things that CHROs are I think a very important one, right? Especially since we were talking about tech, right? CHROs are no longer just number chasers, right? They really have to have the tools that give them kind of like a crystal ball, right? For them to be able to have insights, to be able to predict and to do some trend spotting on what may happen to an organization, right? And that's critical, because it's going to help an organization stay ahead of the curve. So hopefully that can give you a quick rundown.
No, absolutely. I think you're spot on, because I think a lot of CHROs came into the forefront during the pandemic, and they really were center stage when it came to the overall business recovery focus, and they perhaps need to reinvent themselves as companies look at business growth in an environment which is uncertain, a lot of headwinds as far as the economy goes, and a whole lot of other pressures, changing dynamics of the employee-employer relationship, and so on and so forth. And perhaps we might also see more and more aligned, leaders with other function leaders as well, moving into HR as CHROs. And I'm seeing in many companies that I have come across in large enterprises, now the CHRO doesn't necessarily have to be have grown through the ranks, but could be somebody from another function who comes and really manages that particular role. But I think all in all, exciting, because I think we're going to see some significant focus on the CHRO, and some real great leadership qualities emerge as well.